The heavy oak doors of the Sterling Estate Library remained closed, trapping the silence inside. Outside, the storm battered against the high Victorian windows, the relentless rain sounding like 1,000 fingers tapping against the glass, demanding entry. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old money, leather bindings, polished mahogany, and the stale, copper tang of suppressed rage. 3 people sat around the massive desk, their breathing the only rhythm in the room. On one side sat Marcus and Alina Sterling, dressed in mourning black that cost more than most people earned in a decade. They did not look sad. They looked impatient, like predators waiting for a cage to open. Across from them sat the family attorney, Mr. Thorne, a man whose face was as creased and unreadable as the legal documents spread before him. But there was a 4th chair, an empty chair. It sat in the center of the room, a stark, velvet-covered void that seemed to pull the oxygen right out of the air. Marcus checked his platinum watch, the metal clinking softly against the table surface. He leaned forward, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated through the quiet room. He demanded to know how much longer this charade would last. He insisted that his father, Arthur Sterling, had been out of his mind in his final days, and that whatever game the lawyer was playing needed to end now. Mr. Thorne did not look up. He simply adjusted his glasses and placed a small, plastic evidence bag on the polished desk. Inside the bag was not a deed or a stock certificate or a key to a Swiss bank vault. It was a dirty, crumpled paper napkin, the cheap kind you find in a roadside diner. Stained with grease and wrinkled with age, it looked like trash. But Mr. Thorne treated it like a holy relic. He spoke softly, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. He told them that their father died possessing billions in assets, yet this napkin was the only thing he held in his hand when he took his last breath. He explained that 5 words were scribbled on this napkin, 5 words that had stripped Marcus and Alina of everything they thought they owned. Just as Alina opened her mouth to scream, the library doors groaned. The heavy wood swung inward on slow, complaining hinges. A draft of cold, damp air swept into the warm room, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust fumes. A woman stood in the doorway. She was dripping wet, her cheap coat soaked through to the bone, clutching a broken umbrella with trembling hands. She was a black woman, exhausted, looking as if she had walked 5 miles in the storm just to get here. Nana had no idea why she had been summoned. She didn't know who Arthur Sterling was. All she knew was that she was terrified. Marcus stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floorboards. He pointed a shaking finger at her, shouting that this was the woman who had stolen their birthright. He called her a thief, a con artist, a nobody, but Nana didn't hear him. Her eyes were locked on the plastic bag on the desk. She recognized that napkin. She recognized the handwriting. And suddenly, the memory of a rainy Tuesday night came rushing back. The night she served a homeless man a bowl of soup and wrote him a note that she thought no one else would ever see. If you want to know what was written on that napkin, and how a simple waitress accidentally bought a billion-dollar empire, you need to listen to every second of this story. But before we reveal the secret that destroyed a dynasty, make sure you click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the twist coming up in the next chapter. The story begins not in this mansion, but 3 months earlier, in a place where hope was in short supply and the coffee was always burnt. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, a relentless gray sheet that washed the color out of the city's streets and turned the gutters into rushing rivers of black water. It was the kind of weather that made the wealthy retreat into their high-rise apartments and the desperate disappear into the shadows. But for Nana, it was just another obstacle in a life that seemed determined to test her breaking point. She stood near the service station of the Gilded Spoon, an upscale bistro in the heart of the financial district, pressing her back against the cool plaster of the wall for a stolen second of rest. Her feet throbbed in rhythm with her heartbeat, a dull, aching reminder that she had been standing for 9 hours on thin soles that offered no support. The restaurant was a cacophony of lunch rush noise, a swirling storm of clinking silverware, low conversations about stock portfolios, and the sharp, impatient snapping of fingers summoning staff. To the people sitting at the velvet-upholstered booths, Nana was not a person with a name, a history, or a sick child waiting at home. She was simply a pair of hands that delivered martinis and cleared away half-eaten Cobb salads. "Table 4 is waving, Nana. Do you need a written invitation?" The voice of the manager, Mr. Vance, cut through the ambient noise like a serrated knife. Nana stiffened, her brief moment of relief shattering instantly. She pushed herself off the wall, forcing a neutral expression onto her face as she turned to look at him. Mr. Vance was a man who wore suits that were too tight for his frame, as if he were trying to physically squeeze himself into a higher tax bracket. He had slicked back hair and eyes that constantly scanned the room for imperfections, usually landing on Nana. He didn't like her. He never said it explicitly, but it was there in the way he assigned her the worst sections near the kitchen doors, the way he scrutinized her uniform for the slightest wrinkle, and the way he spoke to her with a slow, exaggerated enunciation, as if she wouldn't understand him otherwise. "I'm going now, Mr. Vance," Nana said, her voice steady despite the fatigue pulling at her throat. She didn't have the luxury of anger. Anger was expensive, it cost jobs, and she needed this one desperately. Her daughter, Maya, had just turned 7, and her asthma was getting worse with the damp weather. The inhalers were not covered by the catastrophic insurance plan the restaurant offered, and the rent on their small, drafty apartment was due in 3 days. Nana swallowed her pride, just as she did every single day, and walked briskly toward table 4. The man at table 4 was typical of the Gilded Spoon's clientele. He was young, possibly in his late 20s, wearing a watch that cost more than Nana made in a year. He was busy talking on his phone, not even glancing up as Nana approached with the water pitcher. She waited patiently for a break in his conversation, the condensation from the pitcher chilling her palm. When he finally acknowledged her, it was with a dismissive wave of his hand, signaling her to pour without pausing his call about mergers and acquisitions. She poured the water with practiced precision, careful not to let a single drop splash onto the pristine white tablecloth. As she turned to leave, he snapped his fingers. It was a sharp, degrading sound that made the muscles in Nana's neck tight. "Excuse me," the man said, finally looking at her, though his eyes seemed to look right through her. "This steak is overdone. I asked for medium rare, take it back." Nana looked at the steak. It was pink, perfectly cooked, exactly what he had ordered. But she knew the rules of this world. The customer was always right, even when they were lying. "I apologize, sir," she said softly. "I will have the kitchen prepare a new one immediately." She reached for the plate, but he grabbed her wrist. His grip was firm, startling her. The restaurant seemed to freeze for a microsecond. "And tell the chef to hurry," he sneered, releasing her hand as if touching her had soiled him. "I have a meeting in 30 minutes. Don't be slow." Nana nodded, taking the plate. She walked back toward the kitchen, feeling the eyes of the room on her back. She was a black woman in a sea of beige suits and white linen, a splash of contrast that they only noticed when they wanted something. Inside the kitchen, the heat hit her like a physical blow. The air smelled of searing meat, truffle oil, and stress. She handed the plate to the sous chef, who cursed loudly and threw it into the trash. Mr. Vance was waiting by the pass, checking his watch. "You're moving too slow, Nana," Vance hissed, stepping into her path. The lunch rush is peaking. If table 4 walks out because you can't manage a simple order, it's coming out of your paycheck. He sent it back, Mr. Vance. It was cooked perfectly, but he wanted. I don't care what he wanted. Vance's voice rose, causing a few line cooks to look up. I care about the reputation of this establishment. We are trying to attract a certain caliber of clientele here. We need efficiency. We need elegance. Try to project a little more of that if you can. The implication hung in the air, heavy and ugly, if you can. Nana clenched her jaw so hard her teeth ached. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw her apron on the floor and walk out into the rain. But then she thought of Maya's cough, the wheezing sound that filled their bedroom at night, and the terrifying price tag on the new inhaler. She unclenched her jaw. Yes, sir, she whispered. She went back out onto the floor. The rain outside had intensified, hammering against the large plate glass windows that separated the warm, golden glow of the restaurant from the gray misery of the street. It was then that the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. It wasn't a noise, but a sudden, collective silence that rippled through the room, starting near the entrance and spreading like a wave toward the back. Conversations stopped. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. Nana looked up from the table she was wiping and followed the gaze of the patrons. The heavy brass-handled doors of the restaurant had swung open, letting in a gust of wet, freezing wind. Standing in the entryway was a figure that did not belong in the Gilded Spoon. He was an older man, stooped and frail, dressed in layers of mismatched, waterlogged wool that hung off his thin frame like rags. His gray hair was plastered to his skull by the rain, and water dripped from his nose and chin, creating a growing puddle on the expensive marble foyer. He clutched a dirty plastic bag in one shaking hand, and his face was a map of deep lines and weary sorrow. He looked like a ghost that had wandered in from a different, harder world. The hostess, a young woman named Chloe who was terrified of confrontation, stood frozen behind her podium, her eyes wide. The patrons closest to the door recoiled, pulling their designer handbags closer to their bodies, their faces twisting in disgust. The smell of wet wool and unwashed humanity began to drift into the dining room, clashing with the scent of expensive perfume and roasted duck. Mr. Vance was moving before Nana could even process the scene. He marched across the dining room floor with the stride of an executioner, his face purple with indignation. He stopped 3 feet away from the old man, not wanting to get close enough to touch him. "You," Vance barked, his voice echoing in the silent room. "You cannot be in here. Get out." Now, the old man blinked, his eyes watery and red-rimmed. He didn't seem to hear Vance immediately. He was shivering violently, his tremors so bad that the plastic bag in his hand rustled like dry leaves. "Please," the old man rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "Just a cup of coffee. I have money. I just need to warm up. The shelter is closed until 6. "I don't care if you have gold bars in that bag," Vance sneered, pointing a manicured finger toward the storm outside. "This is a private establishment. We have a dress code, and we certainly do not serve vagrants. You are disturbing my customers. Leave before I call the police." The old man took a step forward, reaching out a shaking hand as if to steady himself on the hostess stand. "Please," he whispered again, "I'm so cold." "Don't touch that." Vance shouted, stepping back as if the man were radioactive. "Chloe, call security. Get this filth out of my lobby." Nana watched from across the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw the way the customers watched with morbid fascination, judging, sneering, relieved that someone else was being humiliated so they could feel superior. She saw the sheer terror and exhaustion in the old man's eyes. It was the same look she sometimes saw in the mirror when the bills piled up and the world felt too heavy to carry. It was the look of a human being who had been stripped of everything except the need to survive. Without thinking, without calculating the risk, Nana dropped the napkin she was holding. She walked past table 4, past the kitchen doors, and straight toward the commotion in the lobby. Her heart was screaming at her to stop, to think about Maya, to think about the rent. But her feet wouldn't listen. "Mr. Vance," Nana said, her voice clear and firm, cutting through the tension. Vance spun around, his eyes bulging. "Nana, get back to your section. I am handling this." "He's shaking, Mr. Vance," Nana said, stepping between the manager and the old man. She could smell the rain on the stranger, the scent of cold asphalt and old sorrow. It didn't smell like filth to her, it smelled like hardship. "He's hypothermic. Look at his lips. They're blue. If we send him back out there right now, he might die." "That is not our problem," Vance hissed, lowering his voice so the customers wouldn't hear his cruelty quite so clearly. "He is bad for business. Look at them, Nana. They are uncomfortable. If you don't get out of my way, you can join him on the street." The threat hung in the air, sharp and real. Nana looked at the old man. He was looking at her with an expression of utter confusion, as if he couldn't understand why this woman in a crisp uniform was standing in front of him like a shield. "I will seat him in my section," Nana said quietly. "In the back corner near the kitchen doors. No one will see him. I will pay for his coffee myself. Please, Mr. Vance, it's pouring, just 20 minutes. Vance stared at her, his jaw working. He looked at the customers, who were beginning to whisper. He realized that dragging a freezing old man out by force might cause more of a scene than letting him sit in the shadows. He let out a sharp, disgusted breath. "Fine," Vance spat, leaning in close so only Nana could hear. "Put him in the back. But if he causes a single disturbance, or if one customer complains about the smell, you are fired. Do you understand me? Fired immediately." "I understand," Nana said. She turned to the old man and offered him a gentle smile, the first genuine smile anyone had given him in a very long time. "Sir, my name is Nana. Come with me. Let's get you out of the cold." She didn't wait for his response. She gently placed a hand on his damp, wool-covered elbow. He flinched at the touch, expecting a blow, but when he realized she was guiding him, he let out a long, shuddering sigh and allowed her to lead him through the restaurant. Nana walked with her head high, ignoring the stares of the wealthy patrons, ignoring the whispers that trailed behind them like smoke. She led him to the small, two-top table in the far corner, near the swinging kitchen doors. It was the worst table in the house, noisy and drafty, but to the old man it seemed to be a throne. He collapsed into the chair, his bones settling with a series of soft pops. Nana immediately poured him a glass of water, no ice. "I'll be right back with some hot coffee and soup," she said softly. "On the house, don't worry about the menu." The old man looked up at her. His eyes were a piercing, startling shade of blue buried deep within the wrinkles of his face. For a second, just a fleeting second, the fog of exhaustion seemed to clear from his gaze, and he looked at her with a terrifying, razor-sharp clarity. It was the look of a man who was used to assessing the value of things. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough. "Why risk your job for me?" Nana paused, her hand on her order pad. She thought about the cruelty of the manager, the indifference of the customers, and the cold reality of the world outside. "Because," she said simply, "nobody should have to be cold. And guests don't pay for kindness in my section." She turned and walked toward the kitchen to place the order, unaware that the old man was watching her retreat with an intensity that could have burned a hole through the wall. She didn't know that the man shivering in the cheap coat was Arthur Sterling, the owner of the very building they were standing in, and a man whose net worth was larger than the GDP of some small countries. And she certainly didn't know that she had just passed the first round of a test she didn't even know she was taking. But the test wasn't over. As Nana entered the kitchen to fight for a bowl of soup for a stranger, Arthur Sterling reached into his wet pocket and pulled out a sleek, waterproof phone. He didn't make a call. He simply tapped a few buttons, opening a secure app connected to the security cameras of the restaurant. He wasn't just watching Nana, He was recording her. He watched her argue with the line cook, pleading for a fresh bowl of minestrone. He watched her pay for it out of her own tips jar, counting out crumpled dollar bills with a grim look on her face. When she returned to the table with the steaming soup and a basket of warm bread, Arthur hid the phone. He ate with the hunger of a starving man, his hands shaking so badly that soup spilled onto the table. Nana didn't flinch. She simply grabbed a napkin and wiped it up, chatting to him softly about the weather, treating him with the same deference she would have treated the CEO at table 4. When he finished, the restaurant had begun to empty out. The lunch rush was over. Arthur sat back, the warmth finally returning to his limbs. He watched Nana cleaning a nearby booth. He knew he should leave. He had seen what he needed to see. But a lifetime of suspicion, a lifetime of being surrounded by people who only wanted his money, made him hesitate. Was it real? Was she just performing charity because she thought he was a pitiful case? He needed to be sure. He needed to push her. Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, not the alligator skin one he usually carried, but a battered Velcro one he used for his disguise. He pulled out a single, crumpled $5 bill. The bill for the soup and coffee, had he been charged, would have been $20. A $5 tip on a bill he didn't pay was an insult. It was worse than nothing. It was a statement that her service, her risk, her kindness was worth less than a cup of burnt coffee. He waited until Nana came back to the table. He stood up, avoiding her eyes, and tossed the crumpled $5 bill onto the table. It landed in a wet spot, looking pathetic and small. "Thanks for the food," he grunted, making his voice sound ungrateful and rude. Service was slow, though. He turned and began to shuffle toward the exit, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the dangerous part. This was the moment where the mask usually slipped. He waited for her to call him ungrateful. He waited for her to yell, to throw the money at him, to tell him he was a waste of space. He wanted to see if the kindness was conditional. He reached the heavy brass doors and pushed them open. The cold air hit him again. He was halfway out onto the sidewalk when he heard the door open behind him. "Sir, wait," Arthur froze. A small, sad smile touched his lips. Here it comes, he thought, the anger, the regret. He turned around slowly, bracing himself for the insults. Nana was standing in the doorway, oblivious to the rain soaking her uniform. She held the crumpled $5 bill in her hand. She walked up to him, her eyes searching his face. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed, not for herself, but for him. She reached out and took his hand, her palm warm against his cold skin. She pressed the $5 bill back into his fingers and closed his fist around it. "I can't take this," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the sound of the traffic. Arthur stared at her, genuinely confused. "It's money, you need it. I saw you counting your tips." "I do need it," Nana admitted, looking him in the eye, "but you need it more. And like I told you inside." She paused, and her next words seemed to stop the rotation of the earth for Arthur Sterling. "Guests don't pay for kindness, sir. Kindness is the one thing we give for free, or it isn't kindness at all. Keep your money. Stay warm." She gave his hand a gentle squeeze, then turned and walked back into the warmth of the restaurant, leaving Arthur Sterling standing alone in the rain. He looked down at the $5 bill in his hand. It was wet and dirty. But as he stared at it, his vision blurred. For the first time in 40 years, the iron wall around Arthur's heart developed a hairline fracture. He had come looking for a confirmation that the world was ugly. Instead, he had been handed a mirror. He walked to the corner where his black town car was waiting, idling silently in the alley. The driver, a large man named Frank, jumped out to open the door with an umbrella. "Home, sir?" Frank asked, looking concerned at Arthur's soaking wet rags. Arthur slid into the leather backseat, the smell of luxury hitting him instantly. He didn't answer immediately. He took a pen from his pocket and smoothed out the crumpled $5 bill on his knee. With a trembling hand, he wrote something on the margin of the bill, staring at the restaurant's glowing windows. "No, Frank," Arthur said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "Not home. Call my lawyer. Tell him I need to make a change to my will. A significant one." As the car pulled away, splashing through the puddles, the camera pans back to the restaurant window, where Nana is seen being yelled at by Mr. Vance for leaving her post. She looks tired, defeated, and small. She has no idea that the $5 bill she just rejected has started a clock that is ticking down to the destruction of an empire. 2 weeks had passed since the incident in the rain, and the atmosphere inside the Gilded Spoon had shifted into a tense, fragile equilibrium. To the casual observer, nothing had changed. The crystal chandeliers still hummed with electric light, the jazz music still floated harmlessly through the air, and the smell of roasted garlic and seared beef still intoxicated the pedestrians walking by outside. But for the staff, and specifically for Nana, everything felt like a wire pulled tight, ready to snap. Arthur Sterling, known to the staff only as the hobo or Nana's pet, had returned. In fact, he had returned every single day at 2 p.m., just as the lunch rush was dying down. He was a ghost haunting the back corner of the restaurant. He wore the same tattered coat, smelling faintly of damp earth and old tobacco. He ordered the same thing, a cup of black coffee and a bowl of the cheapest soup on the menu. And every day, Mr. Vance, the manager, grew a shade more purple with suppressed rage. Vance tolerated Arthur's presence only because he feared a public scene that might disturb the diners, but his patience was eroding like a cliff face in a storm. He took his frustration out on Nana, scrutinizing her every move, cutting her hours, and giving her the most physically demanding side work. Yet Nana never complained. She served Arthur with the same grace she offered the city's elite, refilling his coffee without being asked and slipping him extra rolls of bread wrapped in napkins when Vance wasn't looking. For Arthur Sterling, these daily lunches had become the only hour of the day that felt real. He had spent the last 40 years in boardrooms where every handshake was a contract and every smile was a calculation. Here, in the drafty corner of his own restaurant, he was invisible to the world, but he was seen by Nana. He watched her work. He saw the way she massaged her lower back when she thought no one was looking. He heard the worry in her voice when she took calls from her daughter's school on the landline in the host stand. He was gathering data, not on stock prices, but on the human condition. But today, the test was about to escalate. Today, Arthur would not just be an observer of Nana's struggle, he would become a witness to the very rot eating away at his own legacy. The lunch rush was particularly brutal that Tuesday. The rain had returned, driving everyone indoors, and the restaurant was packed with wet umbrellas and impatient appetites. Nana was juggling 5 tables, her mind a blur of orders, dressing on the side, no glute, extra ice, rush the check. As she rushed past the host stand, she saw the heavy front doors swing open. 2 figures stepped in, shaking off expensive designer raincoats with an air of annoyance. Nana froze mid-step. She recognized them instantly from the society pages of the newspapers left behind by customers. It was Marcus and Alina Sterling, Arthur's children. They looked like royalty descending into a peasant village. Marcus was tall and broad, wearing a charcoal suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life. His face was handsome but hard, his jaw set in a permanent expression of dissatisfaction. Alina was a vision in cream silk, a dangerous choice for a rainy day, but she wore it with the confidence of someone who never had to worry about dry cleaning bills. She was talking on her phone, her voice sharp and loud, cutting through the ambient noise of the dining room. "I don't care what the doctors say, he's incompetent. Alina was saying into her device, not caring who heard her. He's wandering around the city like a senile fool. If the board finds out, the stock will tank. We need to lock down the power of attorney Marcus today. Nana felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty door. She knew these people were powerful. She knew they owned the building. What she didn't know was that their father was sitting 30 feet away, dipping a piece of stale bread into a bowl of tomato soup. Mr. Vance practically sprinted across the room to greet them, his face transforming into a mask of obsequious delight. He bowed low, his voice dripping with honey as he offered them the best booth in the house, table 1, directly in the center of the room, commanding a view of everything. Unfortunately, it also commanded a direct line of sight to the back corner where Arthur was sitting. Arthur froze as he saw his children being seated. He lowered his head, pulling the collar of his dirty coat up around his ears. His heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear of being caught, but from a sickening curiosity. He had raised them in the finest schools, given them every advantage, shielded them from every hardship. Now, disguised as the lowest of the low, he would see what kind of adults they had truly become. Nana was assigned to their table. Of course she was. Vance wouldn't trust anyone else to handle the VIPs, even if he despised her. She approached table 1 with her notepad, taking a deep breath to steady her hands. "Good afternoon," Nana said, forcing a warm smile. "Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. Can I start you off with sparkling water?" Alina interrupted without looking up from her phone. "And make sure it's chilled, not iced. I hate floating ice." "And a scotch," Marcus added, scanning the room with bored eyes. "Single malt." "Whatever your most expensive bottle is, don't bother telling me the price, just bring it." "Right away," Nana said. She turned to leave, but Marcus's gaze had drifted past her. He stopped scanning the room and locked his eyes on the back corner, his brow furrowed. "Vance!" Marcus shouted, snapping his fingers. The sound was like a gunshot in the room. Mr. Vance materialized instantly at the table, sweating slightly. "Yes, Mr. Sterling, is everything to your satisfaction?" "No, it is not," Marcus said, pointing a finger directly at his own father. "Why is there a homeless person eating in my restaurant? It smells like a wet dog in here. Is this a soup kitchen now? Are we running a charity?" Arthur sat very still. He heard his son's voice, cold and cruel. He waited for a flicker of recognition, a moment where Marcus might realize that the homeless person had the same eyes, the same nose, the same hands that had held him when he was a child. But there was nothing. Marcus saw only the clothes, the dirt, the poverty. He didn't see the man. "I apologize profusely, Mr. Sterling," Vance stammered, wringing his hands. He is just leaving. I was just about to throw him out myself. He slipped in during the rush." "Get rid of him," Alina said, waving a hand in front of her nose as if wafting away a bad smell. "It's ruining my appetite. And have the staff spray some air freshener over there. It's disgusting." Vance turned on his heel, his face contorted with fury. He marched toward the back corner, and Nana knew with a sinking certainty that this was it. She couldn't let Vance drag the old man out into the storm. Not again, not when he looked so frail today. She stepped into Vance's path, blocking him. "Mr. Vance, please," Nana whispered urgently. "He's almost finished. He's paying. He's not bothering anyone." "Move, Nana," Vance hissed, his eyes darting back to Marcus and Alina, who were watching with amusement. "You have protected this leech for 2 weeks. I am done. If you don't move, you're fired. In fact, you might be fired anyway. Get out of my way." Vance shoved past her. He reached the table and grabbed Arthur's soup bowl, snatching it away before Arthur could take another spoonful. Soup sloshed onto the table. "Up," Vance barked. "Now, you are leaving. The owners are here, and they don't want to look at you." Arthur slowly raised his head. He looked at Vance, then passed him to where Marcus and Alina were laughing, clinking their glasses. They were toasting, probably toasting to his imminent death or his removal from the company. The bitterness in Arthur's mouth tasted worse than the cheap coffee. He stood up, his joints popping. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He simply nodded, playing the part of the defeated old man. "I'm going," Arthur rasped. "Wait." It was Nana. She had followed Vance to the table. She ignored Vance's murderous glare and reached out to steady Arthur as he stood. She picked up his hat from the table and dusted it off with a gentle, dignified motion. Then she turned to face table 1. The entire restaurant was watching now. Nana walked Arthur toward the door, which required them to pass directly by Marcus and Alina. As they approached the booth, Marcus leaned out, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Hey," Marcus called out to Arthur. "Buddy, you forgot something." Arthur stopped. He looked at his son. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a quarter, 25 cents. He flicked it at Arthur. The coin hit Arthur in the chest and fell to the floor with a hollow, metallic sound. "Buy yourself some soap," Marcus laughed. Alina giggled, sipping her sparkling water. The silence that followed was deafening. Nana looked at the coin on the floor. Then she looked at Marcus. Her face was calm, but her eyes were burning with a fire that could have leveled the building. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She slowly bent down, picked up the quarter, and placed it gently on the edge of Marcus's table. "He doesn't need your charity, sir," Nana said, her voice carrying through the silent room. "And he certainly doesn't need your disrespect. He has more dignity in his little finger than you have in your entire bank account." Marcus stopped laughing. His face went red. "Excuse me, do you know who I am? I own you. I could have you on the street in 10 seconds. "I know exactly who you are," Nana said, and for a moment she sounded like the one with the power. "You're a man who bullies the elderly to impress his sister. It's sad, really." "You're fired," Marcus roared, standing up. "Vance, get this woman out of here right now." Vance was there in a second, grabbing Nana's arm. "I told you," he screamed, dragging her toward the door. "I told you, Nana, get your things, you are done." Nana didn't resist. She shook off Vance's arm and walked to the door with her head high. She opened it and stepped out into the rain, with Arthur stumbling along beside her. The heavy doors swung shut, sealing the warmth and the light inside, leaving them on the cold, wet sidewalk. They stood there for a moment, the rain instantly soaking through Nana's uniform. She had lost her job. She had lost her income. She had likely lost the apartment, and she had done it for a stranger who couldn't even pay her back. Arthur looked at her. He saw the way her shoulders slumped as the adrenaline faded and the reality set in. He saw a tear mix with the rain on her cheek. "You shouldn't have done that," Arthur said quietly. "Not for me." Nana wiped her face, forcing a smile that broke Arthur's heart. "I couldn't let them treat you like that," she said. I couldn't. My mother raised me better than that." "But now you have nothing," Arthur said, testing her one last time. "I have my self-respect," Nana said, wrapping her arms around herself to ward off the chill. "And I have 2 hands. I'll find another job, but right now I need to go home. My daughter is waiting." She turned to leave, but then she paused. She looked at Arthur, shivering in his thin coat. "You can't stay out here," she said. "It's going to freeze tonight. Do you have anywhere to go?" Arthur hesitated. He had a penthouse 3 blocks away. He had a fleet of cars. But he looked at this woman who had just sacrificed everything for him, and he knew the test wasn't over. The story couldn't end here. He needed to know if her kindness extended beyond the public eye. "No," Arthur lied. "I have nowhere." Nana sighed, a long, weary sound. She looked at the sky, then at him. "Okay," she said. "Okay, you can come with me. I have a couch. It's not much and it's noisy, but it's dry, just for one night." Arthur Sterling, billionaire tycoon, nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. As they walked together toward the subway station, 2 figures silhouetted against the gray city, Arthur made a mental note. He would have to update his will again. But first, he had to see how the other half lived. He had to see exactly what he was saving Nana from. and he had to make sure that when he finally brought the hammer down on Marcus and Alina, it would strike with the force of a god. The subway ride was a descent into a world Arthur Sterling had flown over in helicopters but never touched. The air in the underground station was thick, carrying the metallic taste of brake dust and the damp, sour smell of too many people crowded into too little space. Arthur sat squeezed between a teenager playing loud music through leaking headphones and a woman sleeping upright, her head lolling with the motion of the train. Across from him, Nana sat with her eyes closed, her hand resting protectively over her purse. She looked exhausted, the adrenaline of the confrontation at the restaurant fading into a gray, heavy fatigue. The train lurched through the dark tunnels, the wheels screaming against the tracks in a high-pitched protest that made Arthur wince, but Nana didn't even flinch. She was used to the noise. She was used to the discomfort. This was her commute, twice a day, every day, just to reach a job that treated her like furniture. When they finally emerged above ground, the neighborhood was a stark contrast to the gleaming glass towers of the financial district. Here, the buildings were squat and brick, their facades stained with soot and neglect. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, jumping shadows on the cracked pavement. Trash was piled in heaps on the corners, dissolving into mush under the relentless rain. Arthur pulled his coat tighter, not just against the cold, but against the crushing sense of hopelessness that seemed to radiate from the very concrete. "It's the 4th floor," Nana said, her voice apologetic as they stopped in front of a narrow, peeling door. "The elevator has been broken since Christmas, so we have to walk, I'm sorry." "It's fine," Arthur grunted, though his knees protested at the thought. The climb was slow. The stairwell smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarette smoke. On the 2nd floor, a baby was crying with a rhythmic, desperate wail that echoed through the thin walls. On the 3rd floor, a couple was arguing, their voices muffled but angry. By the time they reached the 4th floor, Arthur was breathing hard, his chest tight. Nana unlocked the door with a jiggle of the handle, a trick born of habit, and pushed it open. "We're home," she called out softly. The apartment was tiny. It was essentially one room carved into sections by hanging sheets and strategically placed furniture. The kitchen was a strip of linoleum with a stove that looked older than Arthur, and the living area was dominated by a sagging beige couch. But despite the poverty, the room was immaculately clean. There were drawings taped to the walls, colorful, crayon explosions of flowers and suns that fought against the gloom of the rainy window. The air smelled of lavender soap and warmth. "Mommy!" A small figure launched herself from the bed hidden behind a curtain. It was a girl, no older than 7, with bright, intelligent eyes and hair braided into neat, intricate rows. She hit Nana with the force of a cannonball, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist. But the impact was followed immediately by a sound that chilled Arthur to the bone. The girl began to cough. It wasn't a normal cough. It was a wet, rattling sound that seemed to shake her entire small frame, as if her lungs were struggling to pull oxygen from the air. Nana dropped to her knees instantly, her face flooded with worry. She rubbed the girl's back in slow, soothing circles. "Easy, Maya, easy, baby. Breathe with me. 1, 2, 3. Maya squeezed her eyes shut, fighting for control, until the coughing fit subsided into a wheezing whistle. She opened her eyes and looked at Arthur, her curiosity cutting through her exhaustion. "Who is that?" Maya asked, her voice raspy. "This is Mr. Arthur," Nana said, standing up and helping Maya to the couch. He got caught in the storm and lost his way. He's going to stay on the couch tonight until the weather clears up." Maya looked at Arthur with a seriousness that belonged to a much older person. She scanned his dirty coat, his wet shoes, and his tired face. Then she smiled, a gap-toothed, radiant smile that lit up the dim room. "Hi, Mr. Arthur," she said. "Did you know that rain is just the clouds sweating? That's what my teacher said." Arthur felt a lump form in his throat. He had expected fear or judgment. Instead, he got a science fact. "I didn't know that," Arthur said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "It's a lot of sweat out there tonight." "I'll make some tea," Nana said, moving to the tiny kitchen. She opened the cupboard, and Arthur, watching from the doorway, saw the truth. The cupboard was almost bare: a box of crackers, a half-empty bag of rice, and a few cans of generic soup. She reached for the tea bags, counting them. There were only 3 left. She took 2. Arthur sat on the edge of the couch, trying to make himself small. He watched Maya pull a nebulizer machine from under the coffee table. It was an old, loud machine, taped together with duct tape. She put the mask over her face with the practiced ease of a child who has done it 1,000 times. The machine roared to life, a mechanical drone that filled the silence. "She has severe asthma," Nana said, placing a chipped mug of hot water and a tea bag in front of Arthur. "The damp weather makes it worse. The landlord won't fix the mold in the walls, so we do what we can." Arthur took the tea. It was weak, but it was hot. "The landlord?" he asked. "Have you reported him?" Nana laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Report him to who? The city doesn't care about this zip code, and the building is owned by some massive corporation. You can't call them. You just send the check to a P.O. box and hope they don't raise the rent again." She sat down opposite him, her hands wrapped around her own mug. She didn't make tea for herself. She just had hot water. "Who owns the building?" Arthur asked, a sinking feeling in his gut. Nana shrugged, looking at the pile of mail on the small table by the door. "Some place called Sterling Properties. They bought the block last year. Since then, the rent went up 20% and the heat stopped working." The name hit Arthur like a physical slap. Sterling Properties. It was one of his shell companies. He remembered the board meeting where Marcus had presented the urban revitalization strategy. Marcus had called it efficiency. He had talked about optimizing underperforming assets. Arthur had signed the papers without looking at the addresses. He had signed away the heat in this little girl's room. He had signed away the mold remediation. He was the reason Maya was coughing. Arthur set his mug down, his hand trembling. He felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with hunger. He looked around the room, the peeling paint, the taped-up nebulizer, the empty cupboards. This wasn't just poverty, this was exploitation, and he was the architect. "I'm sorry," Arthur whispered. Nana looked up, confused. "For what? You didn't break the heater." "For imposing," Arthur said quickly, covering his slip. "You have so little and you're sharing it with me." "We have enough," Nana said firmly, though her eyes betrayed her. She stood up and went to the pile of mail. She picked up an envelope with a red stamp on it. She stared at it for a long moment, her shoulders sagging. It was the posture of a woman who was carrying the weight of the world. Arthur recognized the red stamp. It was a final notice. "Is that bad news?" Arthur asked, knowing the answer. Nana quickly hid the envelope in a drawer. "Just bills," she said, her voice tight. "Nothing to worry about." She turned back to the stove to heat up a can of soup. She divided it into 2 bowls, one for Maya, one for Arthur. "Aren't you eating?" Arthur asked. "I ate at work," Nana lied smoothly. Arthur knew she hadn't. He had watched her work a 9-hour shift without a break. She was starving herself to feed a stranger and her daughter. They ate in silence, the only sound the hum of the nebulizer and the rain against the window. When Maya finished, she crawled onto the couch next to Arthur. She looked at his hand, which was resting on his knee. It was a soft hand, manicured despite the dirt he had rubbed on it. It wasn't the hand of a homeless man, but Maya didn't say anything about that. "Mr. Arthur," she said. "Yes, Maya. Mommy says you have to be brave when the storm comes," she whispered, leaning her head against his arm. "Because the sun always comes back. Do you think the sun is coming back?" Arthur looked at Nana, who was washing the dishes in the sink, her back to them. He saw her wipe her eyes with her sleeve. He looked at the red envelope hidden in the drawer. He looked at the mold growing in the corner of the ceiling, a black stain on their lives. "Yes, Maya," Arthur said, and his voice was hard as stone. "The sun is coming back, I promise you, and it's going to burn all the clouds away." Later that night, after Nana had given him a thin blanket and retreated behind the curtain with Maya, Arthur lay awake on the lumpy couch. The apartment was dark, but he couldn't sleep. He listened to the rhythm of Maya's breathing, shallow, difficult, fragile. He waited until he was sure they were asleep. Then he slowly sat up. He reached into his deep coat pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen illuminated his face in the darkness. He had missed 40 calls from his lawyers, 15 from the board of directors, and 3 from Marcus. He ignored them all. He opened his email and composed a new message to his private attorney, Mr. Thorne. The subject line was simply, "Execute Protocol Phoenix." The body of the email was short. "Thorne, draft a cease and desist for all eviction proceedings at 450 East 9th Street immediately. Use the charitable trust so my name isn't on it. Then I want a full audit of Sterling properties. Every building, every complaint, every deferred maintenance request. If a single tenant is cold tonight, I want the building manager fired. And Thorne, prepare the new will. I'm coming in tomorrow. The war starts at dawn." Arthur hit send. He looked toward the curtain where Nana and Maya slept. He had spent his life building a fortress of money to keep the world out. He realized now that he had locked himself in with the monsters. But tomorrow he was going to open the gates. The morning sun did not burst through the window. It crept in slowly, a pale, watery gray that signaled the rain had finally stopped, leaving the city scrubbed clean and shivering. In the cramped apartment on East 9th Street, the silence was heavy. Nana opened her eyes, her body instinctively tense as she braced herself for the usual morning routine. The struggle to get Maya out of bed, the rush to get dressed, and the dread of checking the mailbox. She sat up on her mattress behind the curtain, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. It took her a moment to remember the guest. She pulled back the curtain, expecting to see the mound of dirty wool coats on the couch. The couch was empty. The blanket she had given him was folded with military precision into a neat square on the cushion. The mug he had used was washed and drying on the rack in the kitchenette. Arthur was gone. Nana felt a strange pang of disappointment mixed with relief. She had half expected him to be a burden she would have to carry for weeks, but his sudden disappearance felt like a loose thread in a sweater. She walked to the small table by the door. There was no note, no thank you, just the silence of an empty room. She sighed, chiding herself for expecting anything else. He was a drifter, after all. Survival was his only loyalty. "Mommy," Maya's voice was small and sleepy. "Is Mr. Arthur gone?" "Yes, baby," Nana said, forcing a cheerful tone. "He had to go." But look, the rain stopped. She went to the kitchen to start the kettle, but stopped dead in her tracks. There was a sound coming from the corner of the room, a sound she hadn't heard in 2 years. It was a low, steady hissing. She turned slowly toward the rusted radiator beneath the window. It was vibrating. She reached out a tentative hand and touched the metal. It wasn't cold. It was hot, searing hot. The heat was radiating outward, chasing the damp chill out of the air. Before Nana could process this miracle, there was a heavy, urgent knocking at the front door. Her heart leaped into her throat. The eviction notice. The red stamp. They were coming to throw them out. She smoothed her hair, told Maya to stay in bed, and walked to the door with trembling legs. She opened it just a crack, keeping the chain on. Standing in the hallway was Mr. Henderson, the building superintendent. Usually, Henderson was a man who looked at Nana with a mixture of boredom and disdain, ignoring her pleas about the mold. But today, he looked terrifyingly awake. He was wearing clean coveralls, and he was holding a toolbox the size of a suitcase. Behind him stood 2 other men in gray uniforms carrying rolls of insulation and buckets of paint. "Ms. Brooks," Henderson said, his voice surprisingly polite, almost breathless. Good morning, we're here to fix the leak. And the mold. Nana stared at him, keeping the chain locked. Mr. Henderson, I asked you about the mold 6 months ago. You said it wasn't a priority. Management called, Henderson said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Top brass, they said it's a priority 1 emergency. They said if it's not fixed by noon, I'm looking for a new job. Can we come in, please? Nana undid the chain, her mind spinning. Management. The nameless, faceless corporation that owned the block never called. She stepped back as the men swarmed into the tiny apartment. They didn't just patch the wall, they went to work with a frenzy. One man began measuring the window for a new seal. Another started scrubbing the black spots in the corner with industrial cleaner. And Henderson said, handing her a white envelope. They told me to give you this. It's a receipt. Your rent has been adjusted. Apparently, there was an accounting error. You've been overcharged for the last 2 years. You have a credit balance now. You don't have to pay rent for the next 6 months. Nana took the envelope, her fingers numb. She looked at the paper. It was official letterhead from Sterling Properties. It showed a 0 balance. She looked at the radiator, sizzling with heat. She looked at Maya, who was watching the workmen with wide eyes. It felt like she had stepped into a dream. She thought of the old man, Mr. Arthur, and his promise the night before, the sun is coming back, but that was impossible. He was just a homeless man. This was just luck, a clerical error, a miracle. Across the city, in the glass-walled penthouse of the Sterling Tower, the mood was the opposite of miraculous. It was apocalyptic. Marcus Sterling paced the length of his office, his Italian leather shoes sinking into the plush carpet. He screamed into his phone, his face a mask of red fury. What do you mean locked out? Marcus bellowed. I am the CEO. I don't get locked out of my own server. He slammed the phone down and looked at his sister, Elena, who was sitting on the white sofa looking pale. Her tablet was in her lap, displaying a series of red warning boxes. It's everything, Marcus, Elena said, her voice trembling. The Cayman accounts, the trust funds, the operational accounts for the real estate division, they've all been frozen. The bank says it's a security protocol initiated by the primary account holder. Father is dying, Marcus shouted, throwing his hands up. He's wandering the streets talking to pigeons. He couldn't initiate a protocol if he wanted to. It has to be a glitch, or a hacker. Get legal on the phone. Get the CTO. I want heads on spikes. The intercom on Marcus's desk buzzed. It was his assistant, Jessica. Her voice sounded thin and terrified. Mr. Sterling, Mr. Thorne is here to see you. Thorne, Marcus sneered. Finally, send the old vulture in. I want to know why he hasn't fixed this. The double doors opened. But it wasn't just Mr. Thorne who walked in. Thorne, the family attorney, entered first, holding a briefcase. But he held the door open for someone else. A man walked into the room. He was clean-shaven. His silver hair was brushed back in a severe, commanding style. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit that fit him like armor. He walked with a cane, but he didn't lean on it. He used it like a weapon, tapping it rhythmically against the floor. It took Marcus and Elena a full 3 seconds to recognize the man they had left for dead. It was Arthur Sterling. He didn't look like the frail, confused old man they had mocked in the restaurant. He looked like the titan of industry who had crushed competitors for 4 decades. His eyes were clear, cold, and hard as diamonds. Father, Elena whispered, standing up. We thought you were at the doctor. Arthur ignored her. He walked past them and sat in the chair behind Marcus's desk, the chair Marcus had been keeping warm for months. Arthur swiveled it around to face them, clasping his hands together. I was at the doctor, Arthur said, his voice deep and steady. And then I was at dinner. You remember dinner, don't you, Marcus? You gave me a quarter. Marcus turned a shade of gray usually reserved for old ash. Dad, that was a joke. We didn't know it was you. You were dressed like a bum. You were testing us. Yes, Arthur said calmly. I was, and you failed. "This is ridiculous," Marcus stammered, trying to regain his footing. "You're sick, you're not thinking clearly. We have power of attorney. We can have you declared unfit." "Try it," Mr. Thorne said from the doorway, opening a file. "I have a notarized affidavit from Dr. Evans stating that Arthur Sterling is of sound mind and body. I also have the logs from your recent transaction attempts." "Attempting to move assets from a frozen trust is a federal crime, Marcus." Arthur leaned forward. "I have initiated a full internal audit of Sterling Properties, specifically the Low-Income Housing Division. It seems my signature was forged on several maintenance deferral orders." Marcus swallowed hard. That was just business, cost-cutting. You taught us to be ruthless." "I taught you to be smart," Arthur corrected him. "I didn't teach you to be monsters." "Ruthlessness in the boardroom is strategy. Cruelty to the helpless is weakness, and I do not tolerate weakness." Arthur stood up. He walked over to Alina and looked her up and down. "You didn't ask how I was," he said softly. "When you saw me shivering in that restaurant, you didn't ask if I was cold, you asked for air freshener." Alina looked down, tears of frustration pricking her eyes. "So what? You're going to ground us, take away our allowance?" "No," Arthur said. "I'm going to let you keep your jobs, for now." Marcus and Alina exchanged a look of relief. "But," Arthur continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream, "you will have no access to the family trust, no bonuses, no expense accounts. You will live on your salaries, and I am rewriting my will." "Rewriting it?" Marcus laughed nervously. "To who? You don't have anyone else. We are your blood." Arthur smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had already cornered the sheep. "Blood is biology, Marcus. Family is loyalty. I found more loyalty in a waitress who makes $3 an hour than I found in this entire building. You want to know who is getting the empire? You'll find out when I die. Until then, get out of my office. You have work to do." Marcus and Alina fled the room like scolded children. When the doors closed, Arthur slumped slightly in the chair, the energy draining from him. The act was exhausting. The cancer was still there, eating away at him, a ticking clock in his chest. Thorne stepped forward, looking concerned. "That was theatrical, Arthur, but are you sure? The girl, she has no training, she's a waitress." "She's a mother," Arthur said, looking out the window at the city's skyline. "She manages a budget of 0 and keeps a child alive. She stands up to bullies. She has integrity. I can hire people to teach her finance, Thorne. I can't hire someone to teach her how to give a damn." Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled $5 bill. He placed it on the glass desk. "Draft the papers, Thorne," Arthur commanded. "Everything, the stocks, the properties, the controlling interest. It all goes to Nana Brooks, but seal it. She is not to know until I am gone. I want her to have a few more months of peace before the war really begins." Thorne nodded slowly. "And the children, they will contest it, they will destroy her." "Let them try," Arthur said, closing his eyes. "They have money, she has something they don't." "What's that?" Thorne asked. Arthur opened his eyes. "She has the truth, and she has me watching her back." Back in the apartment, Nana stood by the window, feeling the warmth of the radiator against her legs. She watched the city below, the streets drying in the sun. She didn't know that 3 miles away, a pen was scratching across a legal document, signing her name next to a figure that had 9 zeros. She didn't know that the homeless man was currently buying her freedom. All she knew was that for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. 3 months drifted by, bringing with them a slow, golden autumn that turned the city parks into riots of amber and rust. For Nana, life had settled into a strange, quiet rhythm. The apartment, once a source of constant anxiety, had become a sanctuary. The heat worked, the mold was gone, and the mysterious rent credits continued to appear on her statements like clockwork. She didn't question it too closely, afraid that if she pulled at the thread, the magic would unravel. She simply thanked God and focused on Maya, whose breathing had improved in the dry, warm air. But while Nana's world was stabilizing, Arthur Sterling's world was shrinking. In the penthouse of the Sterling Tower, the curtains were drawn against the bright autumn sun. The room smelled of antiseptic and expensive lilies, the scent of a wealthy death. Arthur lay in the center of his massive bed, his body a fragile husk of the titan he had once been. The cancer had moved with terrifying speed, stripping the flesh from his bones and the color from his skin. But his mind remained sharp, a blade of glass hidden in a pile of wool. He spent his waking hours listening to Mr. Thorne read reports on Nana. He knew she had bought Maya a new winter coat. He knew she had started an online paralegal course at night. He smiled at that. She was preparing to fight a war she didn't even know was coming. "The children are outside, sir," Mr. Thorne said, placing a glass of water on the nightstand. "They have been demanding to see you for 3 days." "Let them wait," Arthur wheezed, his voice a dry rustle. "They don't want to see me, Thorne. They want to see if I'm dead yet. They want to check the expiration date on the milk." Arthur tried to sit up, pain flashing across his face. He looked at the calendar on the wall. It was Tuesday. Tuesday was soup day. For 12 weeks, he hadn't missed a Tuesday at the Gilded Spoon, even when he had to lean heavily on his cane, even when the makeup artist he hired had to work for an hour to make him look like a homeless man instead of a dying billionaire. But today he couldn't stand. His legs felt like lead. "I need to go, Thorne," Arthur whispered. "One last time." "Sir, you can't," Thorne said gently. "Your oxygen levels are critical. The doctor said moving you could trigger a cardiac event." "Then I'll die eating tomato soup," Arthur snapped, summoning a flash of his old fire. "Get the coat, get the car. If I die in this bed looking at those vultures in the hallway, I will haunt you forever." An hour later, a stooped figure in a filthy coat shuffled through the service entrance of the Gilded Spoon. The staff ignored him, accustomed to Nana's stray wandering in. But Nana noticed. She was at the POS station punching in an order when she saw him. She dropped her pen. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken deep into his skull, and his hands trembled so violently he could barely hold his cane. She rushed over to him, guiding him to his usual table in the back. "Mr. Arthur," she said, her voice thick with worry. "You shouldn't be out. You look sick." "Just a touch of the flu," Arthur lied, his voice barely audible. I needed to see a friendly face." Nana sat with him, ignoring the lunch rush. She brought him his soup, but he didn't eat. He just stared at her, memorizing her face. He saw the strength in her jaw, the kindness in her eyes, the way she carried herself with dignity despite the uniform. He was looking at the future of his company. He was looking at his legacy. "How is Maya?" Arthur asked, leaning forward. "She's doing great," Nana beamed. "She got an A on her science project. She wants to be a meteorologist now, because of what you said about the clouds." Arthur smiled, a tear tracking a clean line through the makeup on his cheek. "That's good, that's very good, Nana. I have to go away for a while, a long trip." Nana felt a cold knot in her stomach. She reached out and took his hand. It was ice cold. "Where are you going? Do you have family to take care of you?" "I have family," Arthur said, his voice bitter. "But you are the one who took care of me. Listen to me, Nana." His grip on her hand tightened, surprisingly strong. "Storms don't last forever, but when the sun comes out, it can be blinding. Don't let it blind you. Keep your eyes open. Promise me." "I promise," Nana whispered, confused but moved by his intensity. "And remember," Arthur said, pulling a small, sealed envelope from his pocket and sliding it across the table. "Guests don't pay for kindness, but sometimes kindness pays for itself. Don't open this yet. Open it when you hear about the old man in the tower." He stood up, swaying dangerously. Nana moved to help him, but he held up a hand. "No," he said. "I need to walk out on my own 2 feet." He turned and shuffled toward the door. He didn't look back. He couldn't. If he looked back, he would stay, and he couldn't die here. He had to die in the tower to seal the legal documents with his final breath. That night, the rain returned. It lashed against the windows of Nana's apartment as she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the white envelope Arthur had given her. It had no writing on it, just a heavy wax seal. She felt a strange heaviness in her chest, a sense of loss she couldn't explain. Across the city, the news broke at midnight. The chyron on the 24-hour news channel flashed red. Arthur Sterling, billionaire tycoon, dead AT 78. Nana didn't see the news. She was asleep. She didn't know that Arthur Sterling had died holding a paper napkin in his hand. She didn't know that Marcus and Alina were currently tearing apart his office, looking for the will, screaming at the staff. She didn't know that Mr. Thorne was currently sitting in a vault, holding a document that would turn Nana's life into a target. The next morning, Nana arrived at work to find the gilded spoon in chaos. Mr. Vance was running around in a panic. The restaurant was closed for a private event. "What's going on?" Nana asked, hanging up her coat. "The memorial," Vance snapped, looking frazzled. "Arthur Sterling died last night. The family is holding the wake here. Can you believe it? Here, they rented the whole place. We need everyone on the floor, black uniforms, best behavior. If you mess this up, Nana, I swear." Nana felt the blood drain from her face. Arthur Sterling, the man who owned the building. She felt a pang of sympathy for the family, unaware of who they truly were. She changed into her black uniform and went out to the floor. The room was filled with the city's elite. Men in dark suits whispered about stock prices. Women in veils discussed the inheritance. And there, at the center table, sat Marcus and Alina. They didn't look like grieving children. They looked angry. They were snapping at waiters, drinking heavily, and checking their phones. Nana was carrying a tray of champagne when she approached their table. Marcus looked up, his eyes bloodshot and furious. He recognized her. "You," Marcus spat. "The waitress with the mouth, get me another scotch and try not to give me any advice today. I'm burying my father." Nana felt a flash of anger, but she bit her tongue. "I'm sorry for your loss, sir," she said stiffly. "Just get the drink," Alina hissed. As Nana turned to leave, the heavy oak doors of the restaurant opened. Mr. Thorne walked in. He wasn't dressed for a wake. He was carrying a briefcase, and he was flanked by 2 large security guards. The room fell silent. Thorne didn't walk to Marcus and Alina. He walked to the center of the room and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorne said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "I apologize for the interruption, but per the instructions of the late Arthur Sterling, the reading of the last will and testament is to take place immediately, not in my office, but here, in the place where he spent his final days." Marcus stood up, knocking his chair over. "Here, are you insane, Thorne? Do it in private." "The instructions were specific," Thorne said, opening the briefcase, "and they require the presence of all beneficiaries." "We are all here," Alina shouted, gesturing to herself and Marcus. "Just read it." "Not everyone," Thorne said. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Nana, who was standing by the service station holding a tray of champagne. "Ms. Brooks," Thorne called out, "could you please step forward?" The entire room turned to look at Nana. She froze. The tray trembled in her hands. "Me," she whispered. I'm just working." "Please, Ms. Brooks," Thorne said, his voice gentle. "It concerns the gentleman you knew as Mr. Arthur." The tray crashed to the floor. The sound of shattering crystal filled the silent room. Nana's hands flew to her mouth. Mr. Arthur, the homeless man, the soup, the envelope in her purse. He was, Nana stammered, her world tilting on its axis. "He was Arthur Sterling," Thorne said. "And he has left you a message." Nana walked forward, her legs feeling like water. She felt the hatred radiating from Marcus and Alina. She felt the confusion of the crowd. She stood before the lawyer, terrified. Thorne reached into the briefcase and pulled out a plastic bag containing a dirty napkin. He held it up. "This," Thorne said, addressing the room, is the reason we are here, and Ms. Brooks, it is time for you to take your seat at the head of the table." The crash of the crystal champagne glasses against the hardwood floor seemed to echo for an eternity, a sharp, violent punctuation mark in the heavy silence of the room. Champagne frothed around Nana's worn black shoes, soaking into the hem of her uniform, but she didn't move. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked on the plastic evidence bag in Mr. Thorne's hand, where the grease-stained napkin rested like a piece of trash that had wandered into a museum. The room, filled with the city's wealthiest and most powerful figures, held its collective breath. All eyes darted between the trembling waitress, the furious heirs, and the stoic lawyer. Marcus Sterling was the first to break the paralysis. He let out a laugh, a jagged, incredulous sound that scraped against the tension in the room. "This is a joke," Marcus barked, stepping forward, his face flushed with whiskey and rage. "This is some kind of sick performance art, right, Thorne? You hired the help to be part of the reading. Very avant-garde. Now get her out of here and read the damn will." "Ms. Brooks is not the help in this context, Marcus," Thorne said, his voice cold and precise, projecting effortlessly to the back of the room. "She is a principal party. Now sit down, or I will have security remove you from your own father's wake." Marcus stiffened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Alina reached out and gripped his arm, her fingernails digging into his suit jacket. She looked pale, her eyes darting nervously to the napkin in the bag. She whispered something to Marcus, and he reluctantly sank back into his chair, though he looked ready to spring like a coiled viper. Thorne adjusted his glasses and looked at Nana. He gestured gently to the empty chair in the center of the room, the chair directly facing the children. "Please, Ms. Brooks," Thorne said softly. "Sit." Nana walked through the puddle of champagne, her legs feeling like they were made of lead. She sat in the velvet chair. She felt small. She felt dirty in her uniform amidst the sea of Italian silk and cashmere. She could feel the heat of Marcus's glare burning into her skin. Thorne opened the leather folder on the table. The paper inside was thick and cream-colored, the legal script dense and final. "I, Arthur William Sterling," Thorne began, reading from the document, "being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils." Thorne paused, looking over the rim of his glasses at the siblings. "He wrote this 3 months ago on the night of the rainstorm. I believe you both remember that night." "Get on with it," Marcus spat. "Very well," Thorne continued. "Article 1, Specific Bequests." He looked at Marcus. "To my son, Marcus Sterling, who has always valued price over worth." Thorne reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, metallic object. He placed it on the table. It spun for a moment before settling. It was a quarter. The same quarter Marcus had flicked at the homeless man. "I leave this coin," Thorne read, Arthur's words cutting through the air like a knife. "It is the exact sum of charity you offered your father when you thought he was in need. Since you believe 25 cents is enough to dismiss a human being, I trust it will be enough to start your own fortune. You receive no stock, no property, and no cash assets." A gasp rippled through the room. Marcus stared at the quarter, his face turning a shade of purple that looked painful. He looked up at Thorne, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed by the sheer, public magnitude of the humiliation. "Article 2, Thorne continued, turning to Alina. "To my daughter Alina, who complained that a starving man ruined her appetite." Thorne reached into his bag and pulled out a small, cheap hand mirror. "I leave you this. Not an antique, but a simple glass mirror. I ask that you look into it once a day and try to find the humanity you lost. You receive no stock, no property, and no cash assets." Alina let out a high, sharp cry as if she had been slapped. She stood up, knocking her chair back. "This is illegal. He was insane." "You manipulated him." Article 3, Thorn raised his voice, drowning her out. "The residuary estate." The room went deathly silent. This was it, the empire, the billions, the skyscrapers, the tech holdings, the pharmaceutical patents. "I leave the entirety of my estate," Thorn read, his eyes locking onto Nana, "including 100% of the controlling shares of Sterling Holdings, all real estate properties, and all personal liquid assets, to the only person who treated Arthur Sterling like a man when the world treated him like a dog. I leave it to Nana Brooks." For 3 seconds, there was no sound, no breathing, no movement. It was as if time itself had stopped to process the shift in the universe. And then chaos erupted. "No," Marcus roared, flipping the heavy oak table. The quarter flew into the air. "She's a waitress. She served him soup. You're telling me she gets the company, she gets my house. I'll kill you, Thorn. I'll bury you in litigation for the next 50 years. Alina was screaming, pointing a shaking finger at Nana. "She's a con artist. Look at her. She probably knew who he was. She seduced a dying old man for his money, you whore." Nana shrank back in the chair, terrified. She hadn't seduced anyone. She hadn't known anything. She just wanted to go home to Maya. She looked at Thorn, pleading with her eyes for this to stop. But Thorn stood calm amidst the storm. He signaled to the security guards. They stepped forward, forming a wall between Nana and the screaming siblings. "The will is ironclad," Thorn said, his voice calm but hard. "It contains a no-contest clause. If you challenge it, you forfeit even the personal trust your mother left you. I suggest you walk away, Marcus, before you lose the shirt off your back, too." Marcus lunged at the guards, but they held him back easily. He was a soft man, a man of boardrooms and golf courses, struggling against men built of muscle and discipline. He stopped, panting, his hair wild, his eyes locking onto Nana through the gap in the guard's shoulders. "You think you won," Marcus hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that carried more threat than his screaming. "You think you can just walk in here and take my life. You have no idea what you've walked into. You're not a CEO, you're a nobody. I will destroy you. I will make sure the whole world knows you're a fraud. You won't live to spend a dime of it." "That is enough," Thorn said sharply. "Escort Mr. and Ms. Sterling out of the building, immediately." As the guards dragged the screaming heirs toward the door, the guests began to whisper. Phones were out. The story was already leaking. The black waitress who inherited an empire. Nana sat frozen, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair so hard her knuckles were white. When the doors finally closed on Marcus and Alina, Thorn sighed and sat down in the chair next to Nana. He looked tired. He looked at the terrified woman in the black uniform. "I didn't ask for this," Nana whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't want it. Please, Mr. Thorn, just give it to them. They'll kill me." "They can't kill you," Thorn said gently. "And you can't give it back. Arthur set it up in a trust. It's yours. If you refuse it, the assets will be liquidated and donated to charity, and the company will be dissolved. Thousands of people will lose their jobs, including the people in this room." Nana looked up at the staff, the cooks peeking out from the kitchen, the other servers huddled in the corner. Mr. Vance was staring at her with his mouth open, looking like he was about to faint. "Why?" Nana asked, her voice breaking. "Why did he do this to me?" Thorn picked up the plastic bag with the napkin. He held it out to her. "Because of this, you wrote something on this napkin, Nana. 5 words. Arthur told me that in 40 years of business, no one had ever said anything so true to him. He didn't choose you because he wanted to burden you. He chose you because he believed you were the only one strong enough to carry the weight." Nana took the bag. She looked at the crumpled, stained paper. She remembered the moment. The rain, the rudeness, the choice to be kind instead of angry. "He left you a letter," Thorn said, reaching into his pocket. "He said to give it to you when the storm broke. I think the storm is here." Nana took the envelope. It was heavy. "Go home, Ms. Brooks," Thorn said, standing up. "Security will drive you. Take the day. Read the letter. Kiss your daughter. because tomorrow morning you are not waiting tables. Tomorrow morning you are the chairwoman of the board. And we have a lot of work to do. Nana stood up. She walked out of the Gilded Spoon not as a server, but as the owner. But as she stepped into the cool autumn air, flanked by bodyguards she hadn't hired, she didn't feel powerful. She felt like a target painted in neon. She clutched the napkin and the letter to her chest, the only shields she had against the wolves that were already circling in the dark. The ride from the restaurant to East 9th Street was the longest 20 minutes of Nana's life. She sat in the back of an armored black SUV, the leather seats smelling of newness and isolation. A glass partition separated her from the driver, a massive man with a neck thick as a tree trunk who had introduced himself simply as Frank. He was Arthur's former driver, and now, apparently, he was hers. Outside the tinted windows, the city blurred past, a gray smear of wet pavement and pedestrians huddled under umbrellas. Usually, Nana would be one of them, fighting for space on the sidewalk, worrying about catching the bus. Now she was gliding through the traffic like a ghost, insulated from the noise but exposed to a danger she couldn't yet see. She clutched the heavy envelope Arthur had left her against her chest, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't feel like a winner. She felt like a thief who had been caught holding the crown jewels. When the car pulled up to her crumbling apartment building, the contrast was jarring. The sleek, polished vehicle looked like a spaceship that had crash-landed in a junkyard. Frank stepped out and opened the door for her, holding a large black umbrella to shield her from the drizzle. A few neighbors were standing on the stoop, smoking cigarettes. They stopped talking as they saw Nana emerge from the luxury car. She felt their eyes on her, confusion, suspicion, envy. She kept her head down, muttering a quick thank you to Frank, and hurried inside. The familiar smell of boiled cabbage and old dust usually brought her comfort, a sign that she was home. Today, it felt fragile. She realized with a sudden, terrifying clarity that the thin wooden door of her apartment would do nothing to stop the kind of enemies she had just made. Inside, Maya was sitting at the small kitchen table, coloring in a map of the solar system. She looked up, her face lighting up when she saw her mother, but the smile faltered when she saw Nana's expression. Children are barometers for their parents' fear, and Maya sensed the storm immediately. "Mommy," Maya asked, putting down her purple crayon. "Why are you home early? Did you get fired again?" Nana dropped her purse and the envelope onto the table and fell to her knees, wrapping her arms around her daughter. She buried her face in Maya's small, warm neck, breathing in the scent of lavender soap and innocence. She held her tighter than usual, as if gravity were trying to pull them apart. "No, baby," Nana whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't get fired. I got promoted, sort of." "Then why are you crying?" Maya asked, pulling back to wipe a tear from Nana's cheek with her small thumb. "Because change is scary," Nana said, forcing a smile. "Even good change. Listen to me, Maya. Things are going to be a little different for a while. I need you to be brave. Can you do that?" Maya nodded solemnly. "I'm always brave. Like Mr. Arthur said, the sun comes back." The mention of his name made Nana flinch. She stood up and looked at the envelope on the table. It sat there like a loaded gun. She told Maya to keep coloring and went into the small bathroom, locking the door. She sat on the edge of the tub and broke the wax seal with shaking fingers. Inside were 3 pages of handwritten text, the penmanship shaky but legible, the final thoughts of a dying king. "My dearest Nana, if you are reading this, then the old man is dead and the lawyers have done their job. I can only imagine what you are feeling right now. Fear, confusion, anger, you have every right to all of them. I didn't ask your permission to leave you this burden because I knew you would say no. You are too humble to accept a kingdom, which is exactly why you are the only one fit to rule it. I spent 40 years building Sterling Holdings. I thought I was building a legacy. I thought money was the scorecard of a life well lived. But sitting in that diner, watching you give up your tips to feed a stranger, I realized I had built a castle of sand. My children, Marcus and Alina, are not evil people, but they are broken. I broke them. I raised them to value profit over people, and now they are hollow. If I left the company to them, they would dismantle it piece by piece to fund their yachts and their egos. Thousands of families rely on this company for their livelihood. I could not let my legacy be their destruction. So I chose you, not because you are perfect, but because you possess the one currency my world lacks: empathy. You see people. You saw me when I was invisible. Now the world will see you. They will call you unqualified. They will mock you. They will try to destroy you. Marcus and Alina will come for you with lawyers, with lies, and with hatred. Do not underestimate them. A wounded animal is the most dangerous kind, but you are not alone. Mr. Thorne is loyal to the grave. Frank would take a bullet for me, and now he will take one for you. Listen to them. Learn from them. You don't need to know how to read a balance sheet yet. You can hire accountants for that. Your job is to be the moral compass. Your job is to look at the decisions the company makes and ask the question no one else asks. Is this right? Enclosed in this envelope is a key. It opens safety deposit box 404 at the First National Bank. Inside, you will find the insurance I spoke of. Use it only if they back you into a corner. It is the truth about the family, and truth is the only weapon that never jams. Be brave, Nana. You saved an old man from dying cold and alone. Now go save the rest of them. Yours, Arthur. Nana lowered the letter, her hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. She reached into the envelope and pulled out a small, heavy brass key. It felt cold in her palm. Insurance, secrets. She didn't want secrets. She wanted her simple life back. But as she looked at the peeling paint on the bathroom door, she remembered the eviction notices. She remembered the nights she skipped dinner so Maya could eat. She remembered the way Mr. Vance talked to her like she was dirt. Arthur had given her a sword. She could either throw it away and let the wolves eat her, or she could pick it up and fight. Across the city, the wolves were already gathering. The bar at the St. Regis Hotel was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of expensive cigars and desperation. Marcus Sterling sat in a corner booth, his tie loosened, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had been drinking steadily since they were thrown out of the restaurant, but the alcohol wasn't numbing the rage, it was fueling it. Alina sat across from him, her eyes glued to her phone, her thumb scrolling frantically through social media. "It's trending," Alina hissed, slamming the phone onto the table. "Waitress heiress. The $1 billion tip. People are calling her a modern-day Cinderella. They love her, Marcus. They think it's a fairy tale." "It's not a fairy tale," Marcus growled, slamming his glass down so hard it cracked. "It's a heist. She manipulated a senile old man. We need to control the narrative before she becomes a saint." "Thorne has the medical records," Alina said, biting her lip. "We can't prove he was incompetent. The no contest clause locks us out of the money. If we sue, we lose everything." "We only lose if we sue the will," Marcus said, his eyes narrowing into slits. "But what if she steps down? What if she realizes that running a multinational conglomerate is too hard for a high school dropout? What if the pressure becomes too much?" Alina looked at him, her interest piqued. "What do you mean?" "I mean we don't fight the will," Marcus said, leaning in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We fight the woman. Who is she, Alina? Who is Nana Brooks? She's a nobody. And nobodies always have skeletons. Does she have debts, a criminal record, a crazy ex-boyfriend? We need to find the dirt, and if there is no dirt," Marcus smiled, a cold, reptilian expression that made Alina shiver, "then we manufacture some." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. He didn't look at the screen, he knew it by heart. It was a number for a man who didn't have an office, a man who fixed problems that lawyers couldn't touch. "It's me," Marcus said into the phone. "I have a job. Her name is Nana Brooks. I want to know everything. Where she lives, where her kid goes to school, who her friends are. I want you to turn her life inside out, and I want you to leak whatever you find to the press. By the time we're done with her, I want her so terrified of the public eye that she begs us to take the company back." Elena watched her brother, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Marcus, the kid, is that necessary?" "It's war, Elena," Marcus spat. "She stole our birthright. There are no rules in war. Collateral damage is inevitable." Back in the apartment, Nana unlocked the bathroom door. She washed her face with cold water, scrubbing away the tears. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror. She saw the tired eyes, the worry lines, the fear, but underneath it, she saw something else. She saw the woman who had stood up to Mr. Vance. She saw the woman who had looked a billionaire in the eye and told him that kindness wasn't for sale. She walked back into the kitchen. Maya was still coloring. Nana sat down next to her. "Maya," Nana said, her voice steady now, "pack your backpack and pack your favorite teddy bear." "Are we going somewhere?" Maya asked. "Yes," Nana said, glancing at the heavy locks on the door that suddenly seemed as flimsy as paper. "We're going to stay at a hotel for a few days, just until things settle down." She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the business card Mr. Thorne had given her. It rang once. "Ms. Brooks," Thorne's voice answered immediately. "Is everything all right?" "No," Nana said. "I don't feel safe here. Arthur said Frank would help me." "Frank is already outside your door," Thorne said. "He hasn't left your post since he dropped you off. We have a suite prepared at the plaza, secure floor, private elevator." "Okay," Nana said. "We're coming out. And Ms. Brooks," Thorne added, "don't watch the news tonight. Marcus has already started." "Started what?" Nana asked. "The character assassination," Thorne said grimly. "They just released a statement to the press. They're claiming you were a caregiver who withheld medication to coerce Arthur into changing the will. It's a lie, obviously, but the media doesn't care about truth, they care about headlines." Nana felt a wave of nausea, but she swallowed it down. "Let them talk," she said, surprising herself with the hardness in her tone. "They can say whatever they want. I have the key." "The key?" Thorne asked, confused. "The key to box 404, Nana said. "Arthur left it for me." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Thorne spoke again, his voice was filled with a mixture of shock and reverence. "He gave you the 404 key," Thorne whispered. "My God, he really did leave you everything." "What's in the box, Mr. Thorne?" Nana asked. "The one thing Marcus Sterling fears more than poverty," Thorne replied. "Leverage. Bring that key, Nana. Guard it with your life. Because if Marcus finds out you have it, he won't just try to sue you. He'll burn the city down to get it." Nana hung up the phone. She grabbed her purse, took Maya's hand, and walked toward the door. She didn't look back at the apartment. It was part of her old life now. She opened the door to find Frank standing there, a silent sentinel in the hallway. He nodded at her, his eyes scanning the stairwell for threats. "Ready, ma'am?" Frank asked. "Ready," Nana said. She stepped out into the hallway, leaving the safety of the known for the danger of the unknown. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a woman holding a grenade, and the pin had just been pulled. The suite at the Plaza Hotel was larger than the entire building Nana had lived in for the last 5 years. It had marble floors, velvet drapes the color of crushed rubies, and a view of Central Park that people paid millions to see. But to Nana, it felt like a prison cell wrapped in silk. It had been 48 hours since the reading of the will, and she hadn't stepped foot outside. Frank, the silent giant, stood guard outside the double doors, while Mr. Thorne handled the chaos of the transition from his office downtown. Nana paced the living room, her feet sinking into the Persian rug, feeling a restless energy vibrating under her skin. Maya was in the master bedroom, watching cartoons on a television screen the size of a cinema display. Nana was grateful for the distraction. She didn't want her daughter to see what was happening on the news channels. She didn't want Maya to see her mother's face superimposed next to words like fraud, predator, and black widow. Nana walked to the window and looked down at the street 20 stories below. Even from this height, she could see them. The paparazzi. A swarm of black dots clustered around the hotel entrance, their camera lenses pointing up like the barrels of guns. They were waiting for a glimpse of the Waitress heiress. They wanted a picture of the woman who had allegedly seduced a dying billionaire. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Mr. Thorne. Nana picked it up instantly. "Tell me it's stopping," Nana said, skipping the hello. "I wish I could," Thorne's voice was tight, strained. "Marcus is escalating. He's not just attacking the will anymore, he's attacking your history. We have investigators digging through your trash, interviewing your old landlords, talking to people you went to high school with." "Nana, is there anything at all, in your past that they can use, a criminal record, an unpaid debt?" "No," Nana said firmly. "I've worked every day since I was 16. I pay my taxes. I don't even have a parking ticket because I can't afford a car." "Clean records can be boring to the press," Thorne sighed. "Which is why I'm worried about what Marcus will do next. If they can't find dirt, they usually buy it." "What does that mean?" Nana asked, a cold chill running down her spine. "Turn on Channel 4, Thorne said. "Right now, mute the sound if Maya is nearby." Nana grabbed the remote and switched the channel. The breaking news graphic flashed across the screen in urgent red and white. The headline read, "Exclusive, the secret life of the billionaire's new heir." The screen showed an interview setting. A reporter with a sympathetic face was leaning forward, listening intently. And sitting across from her, wearing a suit that looked brand new and ill-fitting, was a man Nana hadn't seen in 6 years. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the sofa, her hand covering her mouth to stifle a scream. It was Tyrell, Maya's father. He looked clean. He looked sober. He looked like a grieving, concerned father. But Nana knew the truth. Tyrell was a man who had stolen her rent money to gamble. A man who had left her when she was 8 months pregnant because a baby cramped his style. A man who hadn't sent a dime or a birthday card in 7 years. "Oh my God," Nana whispered. "He found him." She turned up the volume, her hand trembling. "She was always manipulative," Tyrell was saying, wiping a fake tear from his eye. "She knows how to play the victim. That's her hustle. She used to tell me she was sick to get money out of me. When I heard she was caring for this old billionaire, I knew exactly what was happening. She isolated him, just like she isolated me from my daughter." "So you're saying she kept you away from your child?" the reporter asked, her voice dripping with manufactured outrage. "For 7 years," Tyrell lied smoothly. "I've been fighting to see my little girl. But Nana, she wants money." She probably told that old man a sob story about being a single mom, but the truth is, I've been here the whole time, begging to be a dad. She's dangerous. I'm scared for my daughter. Nana threw the remote at the TV. It cracked against the screen, but Tyrell's lying face remained, distorted by the spiderweb of broken glass. "Liar," she screamed, the tears finally coming hot and fast. "You liar, you left us. We slept in a shelter because of you." The bedroom door opened. Maya stood there, holding her teddy bear, her eyes wide with fear. "Mommy, who are you yelling at?" Nana scrambled to turn off the TV, but the button on the remote was broken. She ran to the wall and ripped the cord out of the socket. The room plunged into silence. "Nobody, baby," Nana choked out, trying to compose her face. "Just a bad show. Go back to your room." Maya didn't move. She looked at the black screen. Was that my daddy?" Nana froze. She had never lied to Maya about Tyrell. She had simply said he wasn't ready to be a dad. She never told her he was a monster. "No," Nana said, her voice cracking. "That was just an actor, someone pretending." Maya didn't look convinced, but she nodded slowly and retreated into the bedroom. Nana sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Marcus Sterling wasn't just trying to take the money, he was trying to take her daughter. He had found the one person who could legally challenge her custody of Maya. If Tyrell sued for custody now, claiming he was a concerned father and she was an unstable fraud, a judge might listen. Especially a judge paid off by the Sterlings. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Thorne. "I saw it. We are filing a defamation suit, but the damage is done. The public hates you, Nana. We need to counter this. You can't hide in the hotel anymore. You need to come to the office tomorrow and take the throne. If you look weak, they win." Nana stared at the phone. Weak. She felt weak. She felt like a paper doll in a hurricane. She thought about the key in her purse. The key to box 404, Arthur's insurance. Use it only if they back you into a corner, Arthur's letter had said. She looked at the bedroom door where her daughter was hiding. She looked at the broken TV. She wasn't just in a corner. She was being crushed against the wall. Across town, in the back of a dimly lit limousine, Marcus Sterling handed a thick envelope of cash to Tyrell. "You did good," Marcus said, lighting a cigar. The concerned father angle plays well with the suburban moms. Her approval rating dropped 30 points in 10 minutes. Tyrell counted the money, his greedy eyes shining. "This is just the down payment, right? You said if I get custody, I get a monthly stipend." "If you get custody," Marcus blew smoke into the air, "you get whatever you want. Because if you get the kid, Nana breaks. And when she breaks, she signs the company over to me to make it all stop." "She's tough," Tyrell warned, tucking the cash into his jacket. "Don't underestimate her. She survived me." "She survived a street hustler," Marcus laughed cruelly. "She's never fought a Sterling. By the time I'm done with her, she'll wish she had stayed in that diner." Back at the plaza, Nana stood up. She wiped her face. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, hard resolve. She went to her purse and took out the brass key. She held it up to the light. "You want a war, Marcus," she whispered to the empty room. "Fine, but you forgot one thing. I raised a child on minimum wage in a city that wanted to eat us alive. You think you're scary. You're just a boy with a checkbook." She grabbed her coat. She opened the door. Frank looked up, surprised. "Ms. Brooks, where are we going? It's not safe." "I know," Nana said, her eyes burning with a fire that Arthur Sterling would have recognized. "Take me to the First National Bank." "I have a box to open." "Now?" Frank asked, checking his watch. "It's late. The bank is closing." "Then drive fast, Frank," Nana said, stepping into the hallway. "Because I'm done hiding." Price. The First National Bank was a fortress of gray stone and iron, looming over the damp city streets like a mausoleum for money. By the time Frank pulled the armored SUV to the curb, the sign on the door had long since been flipped to closed, and the lobby was dim, lit only by the low hum of security lights. But Mr. Thorne's influence reached far beyond standard business hours. As Nana stepped out of the car, the heavy glass doors were unlocked from the inside by a nervous-looking branch manager who checked his watch and glanced anxiously at the street, as if he expected a SWAT team to descend at any moment. Frank stayed close to Nana, his large frame blocking the view from the street, creating a moving shadow of protection as they hurried inside. The bank manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask for the account number. He simply looked at the heavy brass key in Nana's hand and nodded, his face pale. He led them through the silent lobby, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor like gunshots in a canyon. They walked past the empty teller windows, past the offices where loans were denied and dreams were deferred, and down a spiraling marble staircase into the belly of the building. The air down here was different, stale, cold, and smelling of old paper and copper pennies. It was the smell of secrets that had been buried deep enough to rot. They reached the vault, a massive circular door of steel and tumblers that looked like it belonged on a submarine. Henderson spun the wheel, the mechanism groaning softly, a sound like a sleeping giant taking a breath. He pulled the door open, revealing a wall of metal drawers, each numbered, each locking away a different life. "Box 404, Henderson whispered, pointing to a drawer at eye level. I'll wait outside. Standard privacy protocol." He retreated, his shoes squeaking on the floor, leaving Nana and Frank alone in the vault. The silence was absolute. It pressed against Nana's ears, heavy and suffocating. She looked at the number, 404, error, not found. It felt like a joke Arthur would have made. "Do you want me to do it, ma'am?" Frank asked, his voice low. "No," Nana said, her hand trembling as she raised the key. "He left it for me." She inserted the key. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. She pulled the long metal drawer out. It wasn't full of diamonds or gold bars or stacks of cash. It was mostly empty. In the center of the drawer sat a single, leather-bound book. A ledger, the kind accountants used 30 years ago. On top of the ledger was a digital voice recorder, small and black. Nana picked up the recorder first. There was a piece of masking tape on the back with one word written in Arthur's shaky handwriting. "Listen." She pressed play. Arthur's voice filled the small steel room. It wasn't the weak, wheezing voice of the dying man she had known. It was stronger, angry, but underlined with a deep, crushing sorrow. "If you are listening to this, Nana, it means Marcus hasn't backed down. I hoped he would. I hoped that losing the money would be enough to humble him. But if you are here, it means he is attacking you. And if he is attacking you, you need to know what you are really fighting. You think Marcus is just greedy. You think he's just a spoiled child. He is those things, but he is also a criminal." There was a pause on the tape, the sound of Arthur pouring a drink, the clink of glass. Open the ledger to page 52. The Urban Revitalization Project. 3 years ago, Marcus cut a deal to use substandard materials in the renovations of our low-income housing blocks in the Bronx and Queens. He used insulation that was known to be carcinogenic because it saved the company $4 million. He bypassed the fire safety inspections by bribing a city official. I didn't know. I was checked out, I was sick, I let him run things and I looked away. Nana's blood ran cold. She opened the ledger. Her eyes scanned the columns of numbers, the receipts, the emails printed out and pasted onto the pages. 2 years ago, Arthur's voice continued, cracking now, a fire broke out in one of those buildings. The alarms didn't go off. The fire escapes collapsed. 3 people died. A mother and 2 children. Marcus buried it. He paid off the investigators, he settled with the families out of court with gag orders, and he scrubbed the records. He called it damage control. I call it murder. Nana dropped the ledger. It hit the floor with a dull thud. A mother and 2 children. She thought of the fire escape outside her own window, rusted and shaky. She thought of the mold in her walls. She thought of Maya's asthma. Marcus hadn't just neglected her building, he had turned their homes into death traps to save a few percentage points on a spreadsheet. "I couldn't go to the police," Arthur admitted, his voice sounding old and defeated. "I was a coward. It would have destroyed the company, put thousands out of work, and he is my son. God help me, he is my son, so I kept this proof. I held it over his head to keep him in line, but I can't hold it anymore. This is your weapon, Nana. If you release this, Marcus goes to prison. But be warned, if you release this, the company's stock will crash. The reputation of Sterling Holdings will be destroyed. You will inherit ashes." The recording clicked off. Nana stood in the silence, staring at the ledger on the floor. It was a bomb. Arthur had handed her a grenade, just like she thought, but he had also trapped her in a moral room with no doors. If she used this evidence to stop Marcus from taking Maya, she would destroy the livelihood of every employee at Sterling Holdings. She would destroy the legacy Arthur wanted her to save. But if she didn't use it, Marcus would destroy her. Frank stepped forward, his face grim. He picked up the ledger and dusted it off. "I remember that fire," he rumbled. I drove Mr. Arthur to the site the next morning. He cried in the car. I never saw him cry before. He knew, Nana whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and betrayal. He knew Marcus was a monster and he didn't stop him, he just documented it. He was a father, Frank said gently. It's complicated. It's not complicated, Nana snapped, grabbing the ledger from him. People died, Frank, children died, and he saved the proof to save his company, and now he gives it to me to do what? To finish his dirty work. To do the right thing, Frank said. Whatever that is. Nana shoved the ledger and the recorder into her purse. She felt sick. The image of Arthur Sterling, the kindly old man who liked tomato soup, was fracturing, replaced by a man who valued his bloodline over justice. But she didn't have time to process the betrayal. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Mr. Thorne again. Did you find it? Thorne asked, his voice urgent. I found it, Nana said, her voice dead. I have the ledger. I know about the fire. Thorne let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. Okay, good, now bring it to the office. We have an emergency board meeting in the morning. Marcus has called for a vote of no confidence. He's trying to oust you before you even take the chair. If we walk in there with that ledger, we can force him to resign before the vote even starts. And if I use it, Nana asked, what happens to the company? We take a hit, Thorne admitted. A big one, but we survive. The alternative is Marcus taking control and burying you, Nana. He won't stop with the media. He's coming for everything. I'll be there, Nana said. She hung up and looked at Frank. Take me back to the hotel. I need to think. The ride back was silent. Nana sat in the dark, her hand resting on her purse, feeling the corners of the ledger pressing against the leather. She thought about Tyrell lying on national television. She thought about Marcus smiling in his limousine. They were bullies. They operated on fear. They thought she was weak because she was kind. But as the car pulled up to the plaza, Nana realized something. Arthur was right about one thing. He hadn't left the company to her because she was nice. He left it to her because she was a survivor, and survivors do what is necessary. As she entered the hotel lobby, exhausted and emotionally drained, a man in a bellhop uniform approached her. He looked young, nervous. Ms. Brooks? He asked, holding out a silver tray with a small, folded note on it. A gentleman left this for you. He said it was urgent. Frank stepped in front of her, his hand moving to his jacket, but Nana reached around him. She took the note. It wasn't from Arthur. It wasn't from Thorne. She unfolded the paper. The handwriting was jagged, aggressive. I know you went to the bank. I know about the ledger. If you bring that book to the board meeting tomorrow, the custody suit won't be the only thing you have to worry about. Accidents happen, Nana, especially to little girls who walk to school. Nana stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to the piece of paper in her hand, a threat, a direct threat against Maya. Frank saw her face. He snatched the note from her hand and read it. His face turned to stone. Upstairs, he barked. Now, they rushed to the elevator. Nana's mind was racing. Marcus had eyes everywhere. He knew her every move. The ledger wasn't just a weapon anymore, it was a death warrant. If she used it, he would hurt Maya. If she didn't use it, he would take the company and then take Maya anyway. They burst into the suite. Maya was asleep in the big bed, clutching her teddy bear, oblivious to the fact that she was a pawn in a billion-dollar game of chess. Nana stood over her, watching her chest rise and fall. She felt a cold, deadly calm settle over her. She walked into the living room where Frank was already on the phone with his security team, barking orders for a perimeter check. Frank, Nana said. Frank hung up the phone. We're locking this place down. Nobody gets in or out. I'm calling the police about the note. No police, Nana said. Marcus owns the police, you know that. Then what do we do? Frank asked, looking at her with genuine fear for the first time. We can't fight him alone. We're not going to fight him alone, Nana said. She walked over to the desk and pulled out a piece of hotel stationery. She began to write. And we're not going to fight him in the boardroom. What are you doing? Frank asked. Nana finished writing and sealed the note in an envelope. She turned to Frank, her eyes hard. Arthur gave me a key to a box, she said, but he forgot that I don't play by his rules, and I certainly don't play by Marcus S. She picked up the ledger. Call Mr. Thorne. Tell him the board meeting is cancelled. Cancelled. Frank asked, bewildered. Then Marcus wins by default. Let him think that, Nana said. Tell Thorne to meet me at the Gilded Spoon at 6 a.m. and tell him to bring a camera crew. A camera crew. If Marcus wants a show, Nana said, looking out the window at the sleeping city, I'm going to give him one. But he's not going to like the ending. 6 o'clock in the morning was usually a quiet time at the Gilded Spoon. The chairs were typically upturned on the tables, the floors still wet from mopping, and the air smelling of stale coffee and bleach. But today, the restaurant looked more like a television studio. 2 large vans were parked illegally on the curb outside, their satellite dishes pointed at the gray dawn sky. Inside, a crew of cameramen and technicians were setting up lights, their heavy boots scuffing the polished wood floors. Mr. Vance was hovering near the kitchen, looking like he was about to have a stroke. He kept smoothing his tie and checking his watch, terrified that the chaos would delay the breakfast service. But Nana wasn't worried about breakfast. She sat at table 6, the same table where Arthur used to sit, wearing her waitress uniform. It was freshly pressed, the black fabric stark against her skin. She had chosen to wear it instead of the expensive business suit Thorne had sent over. She wanted Marcus to see her exactly as he remembered her, the help. Mr. Thorne sat across from her, looking uncomfortable in the bright studio lights. He kept glancing at the ledger, which sat in the center of the table like a holy book. Are you sure about this, Nana? Thorne whispered, leaning in. Once we go live, there is no taking it back. The stock will plummet, the board will panic. You might be removing Marcus, but you're also setting fire to your own inheritance. It's not my inheritance, Nana said, her voice calm. It belongs to the people who built it. And the people who died for it. And Maya? Thorne asked gently. Is she safe? Frank has her, Nana said, though the thought made her stomach twist. She's on a private plane to your sister's house in Vermont. Marcus can't touch her there. He can touch anyone anywhere, Thorne warned. Be careful. The producer, a woman with a headset and a clipboard, walked over. We go live in 2 minutes, Ms. Brooks. This is going out to every major network. Are you ready? I'm ready, Nana said. At 6:05 a.m., televisions across the city flickered to life. In the penthouse of the Sterling Tower, Marcus was awakened by his phone buzzing relentlessly. He groaned, rolling over to see a text from Alina turn on the TV. Now, he grabbed the remote. The screen showed Nana Brooks sitting in a diner booth looking straight into the camera. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear. The chyron read, "The waitress speaks, an exclusive statement." "Good morning," Nana began, her voice steady. "My name is Nana Brooks. Until 3 days ago, I was a waitress at this restaurant. Today, I am the majority shareholder of Sterling Holdings. You have probably heard a lot of things about me in the last 24 hours. You've heard that I'm a fraud, that I'm unstable, that I manipulated a dying man." She paused, picking up the ledger. "I'm not here to defend myself," she continued. "I'm here to tell you the truth about why Arthur Sterling left me his company. He didn't leave it to me because he loved me. He left it to me because he was afraid of his son." Marcus sat up in bed, the blood draining from his face. "What is she doing?" he whispered. "This is a ledger," Nana said, opening the book to the page marked with a red tab. "It contains the financial records for the urban revitalization project in Queens. Specifically, it details the purchase of substandard insulation material known as Type 4 asbestos weave. It also details a payment of $50,000 to a city inspector to overlook the fire code violations. On the screen, the camera zoomed in on the receipts pasted into the book. Marcus's signature was clearly visible at the bottom of the authorization form. 2 years ago, Nana's voice hardened. 3 people died in a fire at 450 East 9th Street. My building, my neighbors. Marcus Sterling called it a tragedy. This book calls it a calculation. She looked directly into the lens as if she could see Marcus through the glass. I am releasing these documents to the district attorney immediately following this broadcast, Nana said. And as the majority shareholder, I am calling for the immediate resignation of Marcus Sterling and the entire executive board, effective now. The broadcast cut to black. Marcus stared at the dark screen. His phone was ringing, a constant, shrill scream. It was the lawyers, the PR team, the police. He threw the phone against the wall. It shattered, but the ringing continued in his head. She had done it. The waitress had actually done it. She had nuked the company to kill him. Elena, Marcus roared, jumping out of bed. Get the car, we're leaving. But it was too late for running. Down in the lobby of the Sterling Tower, 2 police cars were already pulling up to the curb. Back at the restaurant, the lights clicked off. The producer gave Nana a thumbs up. We're clear, that was explosive. Nana slumped in the booth, the adrenaline leaving her body. She felt lightheaded. She had just destroyed $1 billion of value in 5 minutes. You did it, Thorne said, looking at his phone. Stock is down 40% in pre-market trading. The DA just issued a statement. They're opening an investigation. Did we win? Nana asked quietly. We won the battle, Thorne said, closing his briefcase. But the war just got messy. Marcus isn't going to go to jail quietly. He's going to burn everything on his way down. As if on cue, the front doors of the restaurant banged open. It wasn't the police. It wasn't Marcus. It was Tyrell. He looked disheveled, frantic. He wasn't wearing the nice suit from the TV interview anymore. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, and his eyes were wild. You, Tyrell shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Nana. You crazy BH, you ruined it. Frank stepped out from the shadows, blocking Tyrell's path. Step back, son. She cut off the money, Tyrell screamed, trying to push past Frank. Marcus called me. He said the deal is off. He said I don't get a dime because you blew up his life. Nana stood up. She walked around the table and stood next to Frank. She looked at the man who had abandoned her. The deal is off because you bet on a losing horse, Tyrell, Nana said coldly. Go home. I want my daughter, Tyrell yelled, his desperation turning violent. He reached into his pocket. Frank moved fast, grabbing Tyrell's wrist and twisting it until he dropped what he was holding. A knife clattered to the floor. Frank shoved Tyrell against the wall, pinning him there. Police are on the way, Frank growled. You're going away for a long time. Tyrell slumped, defeated. He looked at Nana, tears of self-pity streaming down his face. I just needed the money, Nana. I owe people, bad people. They're going to kill me. Then you should have thought of that before you sold your daughter for a check, Nana said. She turned her back on him. Get him out of here, Frank. As Frank dragged Tyrell out the back door, Nana sat back down. She picked up the napkin Arthur had left, the one still in the evidence bag. She looked at the 5 words scribbled on it, the mystery words. She hadn't read them aloud on TV. She wanted to keep them for herself. But now, looking at the chaos she had caused, she wondered if Arthur had been wrong. Guests don't pay for kindness, but she was paying for it. She was paying for it with her peace, her safety, and her daughter's innocence. The front door opened again. This time it was a uniformed police officer. Ms. Brooks, the officer asked. We need you to come with us. It's about Marcus Sterling. Is he in custody? Thorne asked, stepping forward. The officer shook his head grimly. No, sir. We went to the penthouse. He's gone, and he took something. Nana's heart stopped. What did he take? We don't know for sure, the officer said. But the safe was open, and his passport is missing. We have an APB out, but he has a head start. Nana looked at Thorne. Marcus was loose. He was angry, and he had nothing left to lose. Where is he going? Nana whispered. Thorne looked out the window at the gray morning. He's going to where the money is, Nana, or where he thinks it is. Cayman accounts are frozen, Thorne said. He has no access. Not the bank accounts, Nana realized with a jolt of horror. The physical assets, the deeds, the bearer bonds. Where are they? They're in the vault, Thorne said. At the estate, the Sterling Manor in the Hamptons. That's where he's going, Nana said, grabbing her coat. He's going to loot the house and flee the country. Let the police handle it, Thorne argued. No, Nana said. Arthur's ashes are in that house. My future is in that house. I'm not letting him take another thing from us. She walked toward the door. Officer, I need a ride. The officer looked at Thorne, then at Nana. Ma'am, it's a crime scene, or it's about to be. I know, Nana said. I own it. As the police car sped toward the highway, sirens wailing, Nana watched the city fade into the distance. She was heading into the lion's den. Marcus was dangerous, desperate, and armed with the knowledge that his life was over. But Nana had something Marcus didn't have. She had nothing left to fear. She had already faced the worst he could do. Now it was just about finishing what Arthur started. The final confrontation wouldn't be in a boardroom or a courtroom. It would be in the house where Marcus grew up, the house where he learned to be a monster. And Nana was coming to evict him. The drive to the Hamptons was a blur of flashing blue lights and rain-slicked asphalt. The storm that had threatened the city all week had finally broken over the coast, turning the sky into a bruising shade of purple and black. Nana sat in the back of the police cruiser, watching the landscape change from the towering steel of Manhattan to the manicured, gated silence of Long Island. Beside her, Mr. Thorne remained silent, clutching his briefcase as if it contained the oxygen they needed to breathe. They were racing against a ghost, a desperate man who knew the walls were closing in. When they finally arrived at the Sterling estate, the iron gates were standing wide open, bent slightly off their hinges as if a car had rammed through them in a hurry. The main house loomed ahead, a sprawling Gothic mansion of dark stone and ivy that looked less like a home and more like a fortress. But it wasn't the architecture that made Nana's breath catch in her throat. It was the smoke. A thin, gray ribbon was curling up from the east wing, twisting into the wind. He's inside, the officer said, unholstering his weapon. Stay in the car, Ms. Brooks. No, Nana said, opening the door before the car had fully stopped. He's burning it. He's burning everything. She didn't wait for permission. She ran across the gravel driveway, the wind whipping her coat around her legs. Thorne shouted her name, but his voice was swallowed by the gale. She pushed open the heavy front doors. The foyer was grand and silent, filled with the marble busts of dead ancestors who watched her with blank, stony eyes. But the smell of smoke was stronger here, mixed with the chemical tang of lighter fluid. Marcus! Nana screamed, her voice echoing through the cavernous hall. A crash came from the library down the hall. Nana ran toward it. She burst through the double doors and stopped. The room was a wreck. Books had been pulled from the shelves, paintings slashed, and in the center of the room, a fire was crackling in the large stone fireplace, fed not by wood but by stacks of paper. Marcus Sterling stood by the hearth. He looked like a man possessed. His expensive suit was torn, his hair wild, and in one hand he held a bottle of vintage brandy. In the other, he held a framed photograph. He turned to look at Nana, his eyes glassy and unhinged. Come home, Marcus slurred, gesturing to the chaos with the bottle. I was just doing a little redecorating, getting the place ready for its new owner. Stop it, Marcus, Nana said, stepping over a pile of torn deeds. It's over. The police are outside. Just put the bottle down. It's not over until I say it's over, Marcus screamed, throwing the photograph into the fire. The glass shattered, and the flames licked up the image of a smiling Arthur Sterling holding a young Marcus on his shoulders. He loved this house more than he loved me. He loved the company more than he loved me. And now he loves a waitress more than he loved me. Why? Tell me why. Nana looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time she didn't see a monster. She saw a boy who had been starving for 40 years, trying to fill a hole in his heart with money. He didn't hate you, Marcus, Nana said softly, walking closer, ignoring the heat of the fire. He was disappointed in you. Because you forgot that the people who work for you are human beings. You stopped seeing them, and when you stop seeing people, you stop being human yourself. Don't lecture me, Marcus roared. He splashed the brandy onto the pile of papers on the floor. The fumes hit the fire and a wall of flame whooshed upward, catching the heavy velvet curtains. The fire spread instantly, climbing the dry, old wood of the bookshelves. If I can't have it, nobody gets it. Burn it all down. Let the ashes be your inheritance. The heat became intense, pushing Nana back. The smoke alarm finally began to wail, a piercing shriek that cut through the roar of the flames. Marcus, get out, Nana shouted, shielding her face. The whole room is going up, Marcus laughed, a broken, sobbing sound. He backed away toward the wall, trapped between the fire and the window. I have nowhere to go, my life is over. He sank to the floor, coughing as the black smoke filled the ceiling. He curled into a ball, ready to die in the house that built him. Nana looked at the door. The police were rushing in now, shouting orders. She could run. She could leave him there. It would be justice. It would be poetic. But then she remembered the napkin. She remembered the promise she made to herself in the diner. Guests don't pay for kindness. And Marcus Sterling, despite everything, was a guest in her world now. Nana didn't run for the door, she ran through the flames. She grabbed a heavy wool blanket from the sofa and threw it over her head, diving toward the corner where Marcus lay. She grabbed him by the collar of his ruined suit. Get up, she screamed, coughing. You don't get the easy way out, you have to answer for what you did. She dragged him, dead weight, across the burning floor. The heat seared her skin, singing her hair. Frank and the officers met them halfway, pulling them both out of the inferno just as a section of the ceiling collapsed behind them in a shower of sparks and timber. They collapsed on the wet grass of the lawn, gasping for air. The rain fell on Nana's face, cool and sweet. She watched as the firefighters battled the blaze, saving the main structure of the house, though the library was gone. Marcus was handcuffed and led away to a squad car. He didn't look back at the burning house. He looked at Nana. He looked at her with a confusion that was deeper than hatred. He couldn't understand why she had saved him. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of legal battles, board meetings, and press conferences. With Marcus in prison awaiting trial for fraud and arson, and the evidence from the ledger made public, the company was shaken to its core. But it didn't collapse. Under Nana's direction, and with the guidance of Mr. Thorne, Sterling Holdings began the painful process of restitution. They settled with the families of the fire victims. They renovated the buildings. They started a scholarship fund. Nana didn't move into the mansion. She turned it into a foundation for underprivileged children. She kept her apartment on East 9th Street for a while, until the press finally lost interest, and then she bought a modest house in Queens with a big backyard for Maya. 1 year later, on a crisp autumn morning, Nana stood in the private cemetery of the Sterling family. The grass was green, the leaves turning gold. She held Maya's hand. Maya was taller now, her asthma gone, her confidence growing every day. Mr. Thorne stood next to them. He looked older but happier. He handed Nana a small plastic bag, the same evidence bag from the reading of the will. You never told anyone what it said, Thorne remarked softly. The press speculated for months. Some said it was a stock tip, some said it was a prayer. Nana took the bag. She opened it and pulled out the napkin. It was yellowed now, fragile. She remembered that rainy night clearly. She remembered the tired, rude old man who just wanted to be seen. She remembered writing the note and slipping it under his coffee cup, hoping it might make him feel less alone. She unfolded the napkin. There were exactly 5 words scrawled in blue ballpoint pen. "You are not invisible today." Nana smiled, a tear sliding down her cheek. That was it. That was the secret that had toppled an empire and built a new one. In a world of power, money, and noise, the most radical thing she had done was simply acknowledge another human being's existence. "Are you going to keep it?" Maya asked, looking at the napkin. "No," Nana said. She knelt down and placed the napkin on Arthur Sterling's grave, weighing it down with a small, smooth stone. "It belongs to him," Nana whispered. "He paid the bill." She stood up, took her daughter's hand, and turned away from the grave. The sun was breaking through the clouds, just as she had promised it would. Nana Brooks, the waitress who bought an empire with 5 words, walked out of the cemetery and back into her life. A life that was no longer defined by what she lacked, but by what she had given.